Milo has been inside of 5051
And General Strike US.
and General Strike US. And General Strike US has a Chicago branch.
Correct. And most major cities.
Okay. And then maybe we'll just start with like how did you get involved in the labor movement, labor politics, kind of what's a little bit of your background for our audience?
Both my parents were union reps, and my mom was a union steward at one time. So I grew up in a union household. Both of my parents grew up dirt poor in Chicago and lifted themselves out of poverty because of their unions.
Okay. That's awesome. Okay. And so that kind of gave you the knowledge of like maybe like how extreme labor abuses can be.
Yes, they taught me about labor rights, the travesties of the past, how important unions were in defeating company towns, and all the great benefits we have because of unions, like 8-hour work days and OSHA and things like that.
Okay. And labor is like a pretty large faction in Chicago, right? Like if you look at all the different kinds of political factions, like how do you see labor kind of fitting into the fold in Chicago?
In Chicago, it looks like labor and the activist organizations are starting to work together. We're aware how important labor is going to be in this movement. No one can organize nationally like labor can. Chapters around the country and AFL-CIO have more power than any other organization. The president of AFL-CIO just spoke in a Vermont 5051 event on Thursday. Don Villar, Bob Reeder, Tim Dre, they're all great labor leaders here in Illinois and Chicago. Without their backing, I don't think we'll see much change.
Okay. Now, just a simple question for our audience. What do we typically categorize as blue collar labor, like just broadly?
Broadly, that tends to be more like the trade workers. Unfortunately, a lot of the trade workers seem to be pro-Trump right now. Um, I personally would argue anyone who couldn't go 6 months without a check is probably a worker.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Okay. One of the things that kind of trends that we're seeing is like a lot of the labor movements. Our mic has isolation. A lot of the labor movements are responding or reacting to like a fourth industrial wave. And the way that I would break this down is like the fourth industrial wave. You already know this, but for our audience, the fourth industrial wave was the machine automation of physical repetitive motion. Okay. But what we're starting to track is a sort of fifth industrial wave where now we're starting to automate intellectual processes. And so I'm wondering if like in your movements, if you're hearing about talks of like a new class of working class labor, or like if people are starting to try to think about how artificial intelligence might affect labor, or if you have thoughts on that.
Well, wages have been stagnant since the 70s, and they're supposed to increase along with productivity. And since the automation, the wages have not increased, even though workers are producing more than ever before. I know SAG and AFTA, they are currently going to bat for themselves because of AI. They don't want to be replaced creating things like movies, television, video games. I think you're right that there is a new wave coming, and that it's a threat to a lot of workers. On an existential level, what happens when no one has a job anymore because AI has replaced all of us? How are we going to feed ourselves? What's going to happen to the 99% when the 1% doesn't need us anymore?
Sure. Well, and like, so one of the things we've seen is like, you said typically increased productivity should mean a higher wage. And what we see is increased supply of capital is one mechanism that elites can use to artificially suppress wages. Another thing that we're seeing is that, okay, let's pretend like all the processes for a job exist inside of this computer system. Maybe at some point, like the new blue collar is you have a mobile device and you're just the human in the loop doing the kind of repetitive prompting. And we think that that might be like another way to artificially suppress wages. But like, what are some of the key policy areas that you're focused on? I know wages is one of them, but like what other kind of areas do you focus on in the labor movement?
I know General Strike and other organizations have been planning a general strike to save jobs because they're worried about them being replaced. if we don't stand together now, everything will be automated. And sadly, there isn't a catch-all policy we can implement to stop that. I think it'll more depend on the solidarity of working class people. We need to stop doing things like self checkouts and Amazon and all the things that are replacing
Yeah.
workers. Family businesses are dying at an unprecedented rate. Um, Unions are suffering. MAGA thinks America had a great economy in the 1950s, and I would agree that we did.
Sure.
But why did we have that great economy? 35% union membership and taxing the rich at over 90%. If you want that great economy, you're going to have to, do those things again.
Sure.
And one union job often supports, I think it's 3 or 4 other jobs, the money they spend in their local communities. So us being down to 10%
Sure.
union membership's really hurting.
Okay. And also, like, how is the movement evolving with, like, a lot of labor realigning with Trump? Okay. Like, how is that kind of affecting, like, from your experience and all the different things you've seen, like achieving any kind of political aims?
It's made it very difficult. A lot of union leaders fell for the Trump's promised economy. Even the truckers, they voted Trump. Now with what's happening in the ports on the West Coast is showing those workers that Trump never had their backs. I don't know if you're aware, but ports are suffering. The containers from China are not coming anymore.
Sure.
Around May 10th, our shelves will be empty and we won't be able to restock them for
Yeah.
Chinese goods. Our food will be fine. But
Sure.
when there's no container ships, dock workers don't work. When dock workers don't work, truckers don't have freight to haul. And if we don't have freight to haul to our stores, we don't have people to put them up in retail stores. It's a chain of events. And sadly, I think people are going to have to suffer through that before they realize what's happening and who's to blame for that.
I think you're right. So, like, starting to see those shortages on the shelf should, like, so my theory is that the Chinese have much more tolerance for supply chain disruptions than Americans. Okay. So I think when we start to see some of those elements not on the shelves, Americans are going to be like, well, oh my God, what is going on? Do you have anything coordinated for like mid-May, or like, are you seeing any kinds of protests or gatherings that are going to be coming up soon, like anticipating a response or a reaction to those shifts on the supply chain?
A general protest for 614 is going to happen. Indivisible, the Women's March, Fight Back Table, 5051, they're all planning a large event on the national stage. That will be part of it, but it'll be more focused on no kings. However, I think there will be some protests planned once those effects start to be felt by the American people. America's a very individualistic society. We are not like China or Japan where it's a collective. However, I know multiple organizations are starting to focus on mutual aid efforts. 5051 Chicago raised, I think, 1,500 pounds of food on the 19th. LA was 2,500 pounds of food. Houston was like 1,500. Indiana was 1,000 or more. Mutual aid and sort of emulating the Black Panthers is part of the plan for a lot of organizations, General Strike included.
Which, just for context, is a self-sufficiency.
Yes.
Okay.
A community.
Community self-sufficiency. Okay. And these organizations have already been anticipating these kinds of shifts in supply of goods and trying to help keep the community good for a period of transition that we might be realizing very soon.
Correct. Where all the orgs seem to be emulating what the Black Panthers did. And that approach worked. And for real mutual aid, you don't need nonprofits. You just need your community to change it. To me, mutual aid is handing out food to the homeless yourself. Real aid doesn't have restrictions like income limits, and you don't have to be sober to receive aid. It's just helping your community. Community gardens ran by the community. Community potlucks, that's how you change things.
Okay, that's awesome. Do you have any like final thoughts? I'm sure we're going to see you again and we have way more to talk about, but do you have any final thoughts? And then also, where do people find you?
You can find General Strike US online and 5051 at the 5051 movement online. Socials are on everything from TikTok to Mastodon to Facebook. But I would say that labor nationally is aware of what's happening, and I think people are coming around. I think activists nationally are coming around. And in the more than decade and a half I've been doing this, there's never been a time where so many organizations are willing to work together across ideological lines. That is what we need now more than ever to save this country.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.